We live in an era of verified information, yet demonstrably false stories consistently generate higher engagement, more shares, and wider reach than factual reporting. To understand why this happens, we have to define exactly what kind of misinformation we are dealing with. The philosopher Harry Frankfurt drew a sharp distinction between a liar and a bullshitter. A liar knows the truth and deliberately conceals it to deceive you. A bullshitter has a complete disregard for the truth. They do not care if what they say is real or fake, as long as it achieves their goal. Fabricated viral political news fits Frankfurt's definition perfectly. It is not necessarily crafted to subvert a specific ideology. It is structurally pure bullshit, designed exclusively to harvest attention, trigger algorithmic rewards, and generate ad revenue. This raises a critical question about the people who consume and share these stories. Are they simply trapped in impenetrable political echo chambers, or is there a specific cognitive trait that makes them uniquely vulnerable to this manipulation? Mapping the exact psychological profile of a fake news consumer frames the problem as a measurable cognitive vulnerability. In 2019, cognitive researchers Gordon Pennycook and David Rand published a study doing exactly that. Their work redirects the blame for fake news susceptibility away from blind partisanship and points it directly at our cognitive disposition. To build this profile, they tested subjects across 3 specific variables: their capacity for analytical thinking, their receptivity to structural bullshit, and reliance on the familiarity heuristic. Their thesis is counterintuitive. They propose that belief in fake news is driven by a distinct trait called reflexive open-mindedness, a general, uncritical tendency to accept weak claims as true without deploying mental friction. By looking closely at their controlled experiments, we can reverse engineer this cognitive trait and see exactly how it operates in the brain. The researchers suggest that investigating this underlying cognitive disposition may offer more practical interventions than focusing solely on partisan disagreements. The baseline for this research is dual process theory. Human cognition operates on 2 distinct tracks. Type 1 processing is intuitive, fast, and effortless. Type 2 processing is deliberative, analytical, and requires high mental effort. To measure a person's willingness to engage that demanding Type 2 processing, researchers use the cognitive reflection test. Consider the classic bat and ball problem. A bat and a ball cost $1.10 in total. The bat cost $1 more than the ball. How much does the ball cost? The prompt is designed to elicit a fast, intuitive Type 1 response, 10 cents. But if the ball costs 10 cents, the bat would cost $1.10, making the total $1.20. The correct analytical answer is 5 cents. Failing this test indicates reflective impulsivity. It is a failure to pause and override a gut reaction when presented with novel information. When Pennycook and Rand applied this metric to media consumption, the results were definitive. Cognitive reflection test scores negatively correlate with perceived fake news accuracy. Those who naturally engage Type 2 thinking spot the structural bullshit in fabricated headlines. Humans are cognitive misers. Our brains actively avoid resource-demanding thought. This inherent desire to take the path of least mental resistance is the critical first vulnerability in the disinformation pipeline. Do analytical thinkers spot fake news because they actively reason through the text, or do they rely on a lazy shortcut? Are they simply checking to see if the headline comes from a recognizable source, like the New York Times? To test this, the researchers divided their subjects. Half were shown headlines with the source clearly attached. For the other half, the source was entirely removed. The resulting data on this bar chart shows that removing the source had 0 statistical effect on accuracy perception across the board. The data shows that the look at the source heuristic is a myth in the context of rapid social media consumption. People do not use it to judge veracity. High CRT individuals are protected because they actively evaluate the plausibility of the claim itself, completely independent of how it is packaged or branded. These results suggest that when labels and source tags are ignored, the internal evaluation of a claim's plausibility becomes the determining factor in belief. The researchers then tested a second variable, the familiarity heuristic. In a 1945 study of wartime rumors, psychologists Gordon Allport and Milton Lepkin demonstrated that people are far more likely to believe a rumor if they have heard it before. This is known as the illusory truth effect. Mere repeated exposure to a statement increases its perceived accuracy. The brain processes familiar information more fluently and then mistakes that fluency for truth. In this modern study, the effect held true. Prior exposure to a fake news headline strictly increases belief in its accuracy across all demographics. This sets up a stress test. Does this powerful, low-level familiarity effect override the deliberative defense of high analytical thinkers? As this line chart illustrates, cognitive reflection and familiarity do not interact. While both high and low analytical thinkers trend upward with repeated exposure, the high analytical thinkers remain significantly better at discerning truth. They maintain a lower baseline of belief, even when the lie feels familiar. Repetition is a universal human vulnerability. However, an analytical cognitive style provides a resilient, independent baseline of defense against viral saturation. The most unexpected finding of the paper comes from linking political fake news susceptibility to completely unrelated cognitive tasks. The researchers deployed a pseudo-profound bullshit metric. They asked users to rate the profundity of randomly generated sentences made entirely of abstract buzzwords, like wholeness quiets infinite phenomena. They also administered an overclaiming questionnaire. Subjects were asked to rate their familiarity with a list of historical events and scientific concepts. Crucially, several items on the list were entirely fabricated. To see if these disparate tasks shared an underlying architecture, the researchers used a statistical method called exploratory factor analysis. By plotting the data in a three-dimensional spatial model, they looked for clusters: fake news accuracy, overclaiming, and bullshit receptivity strongly grouped together. A single latent factor accounts for the vast majority of the variance connecting fake news belief, bullshit receptivity, overclaiming, and poor cognitive reflection. Meanwhile, real news accuracy operates completely independently. Falling for political disinformation is driven by the exact same cognitive glitch that makes someone nod thoughtfully at a randomly generated buzzword or claim they know about a fake historical figure. The researchers officially named this latent cognitive factor reflexive open-mindedness. It is the impulsive, unquestioning acceptance of incoming information without deploying any necessary cognitive friction. This is distinct from healthy, reflective open-mindedness. Reflective open-mindedness is the proactive tendency to evaluate data and question your own biases once an opinion is formed. Reflexive open-mindedness is simply leaving the gate wide open. The data suggests that fake news susceptibility correlates more strongly with a lack of reasoning than with the presence of motivated reasoning. The architecture of gullibility operates across the political spectrum as a structural failure of information processing. Understanding this cognitive profile forces us to look at the systemic design of modern digital platforms. Current tech industry solutions rely heavily on fact-checking tags and source labels. These are flawed. The data proves that users operating in Type 1 intuitive processing ignore them entirely. To fight reflexive open-mindedness, digital environments must be redesigned. They must disrupt algorithmic flow and forcefully introduce cognitive friction. Environmental cognitive friction means forcing a mechanical pause. It requires designing interfaces that demand a moment of Type 2 deliberation before a user can engage with or share a piece of content. Inoculating society against disinformation likely requires platform designs that protect our analytical baseline from the speed of viral bullshit.